Was history just made? Or was it a made-for-TV charade? I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green. This episode of Right Angles brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, I don't watch the news very often, but I found myself glued to the screen as if it were a moonshot this week when President Trump met with the chairman of the, his official title is actually so obscure I can't even remember it, but the dictator of North Korea, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Kim Jong-un. And I could not stop watching this coverage, and they just kept rolling the same video because they didn't have much of it, as President Trump came out, shook hands with Kim Jong-un, then retired to a meeting room and got together and had a face-to-face talk with nobody there but the translators. Men, I just wanted to kind of kick this around today because in one sense, I'm thinking, wow, this is, we've had agreements in 1994? We had an agreement in 2005 with the Koreans, and both of those resulted in a stronger, healthier North Korean nuclear missile program. And so now President Trump has signed an agreement with the North Korean dictator. And part of me wants to say, well, it would be really easy to overestimate what happened at this summit on June 12th, 2018. And then another part of me, Stephen Green, says it would be difficult to overstate the importance of what just happened on June 12th, 2018. What do you think?
Maybe, maybe not. It's the devil is going to be in the details, so I don't really want to talk about the agreement per se. We've really just seen a broad outline, and the rest has yet to be hammered out. My ideal deal, because, okay, first, we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to acknowledge something, that we are not going to go in and fight what would be a punishing war for everybody for regime change in North Korea. That's not going to happen. It's off the table, especially now that Korea has nukes. So with that off the table, what's the next best thing? Well, my perfect agreement would be one in which we would agree to a permanent peace treaty, recognition of the North Korean regime. They bought that recognition with their nukes, I'm sorry to say, to Presidents Obama, Bush, and Clinton. So recognition and protection of the North Korean regime in exchange for full peace and denuclearization. That those have to be a part of any real agreement. And I would also negotiate a secret side codicil with the Chinese, with Beijing, where if full denuclearization doesn't happen, then it is incumbent on China to remove Kim from power and install their own puppet, and I don't really care what happens there. To me, that would be ideal. I suspect we'll get something a little less than the ideal. I would like to get a permanent peace treaty. I would love to see denuclearization. And maybe that's what we'll get. But you know, what's not getting any press, and I don't understand this because the media knows all this. They've made a big deal out of the fact that, the first meeting between Trump and Kim was just them and their translators. Well, Kim went to private boarding school in Switzerland. What are the chances that his English is not excellent? Seriously. I mean, one of the reasons you go to a Swiss boarding school is to prepare yourself for an international life, and you do that in large part by learning English and or French. You know this guy speaks great English, and it goes to just this nagging suspicion I've had since about the Libya war a few years ago, which is we're all kind of being had. I remember seeing Gaddafi in what must have been a $1,000 fright wig to keep up, his appearance from the 1970s, wearing these gorgeous robes that must have cost $1 million, and he probably got from somebody in London, and Kim probably buys his suits from the same tailor, like Hans and Die Hard, and all the rest. And you just get the idea that all of these world leaders, they all know each other, they all shop at the same places, they all buy the same clothes, they all pretty much believe in the same things. And it's a dangerous game. If, like Gaddafi, you fall out of favor, they can and will kill you. But I just get this nagging suspicion that we're all being put on, all of us, by all of our leaders everywhere, and Trump is on the outs because he's not one of them.
Bill Whittle, Steve brings up an interesting point that I noticed in CNN's coverage. CNN had former Obama administration director of national intelligence, James Clapper, on as an expert commentator. And he was generally reserved in his comments and laudatory of the president for pulling this meeting together. And you've seen a lot of criticism in recent days of the fact that Trump hasn't spent enough time preparing for this meeting, that he's not bringing the normal cadre of experts on geopolitics and especially on that area of the world into the process. And during the course of James Clapper's appearance on CNN, he mentioned that he doesn't know whether Kim Jong-un speaks English or not. And I thought, weren't you the director of national intelligence? I mean, I don't know whether he speaks English or not either, but I wasn't the director of national intelligence. And so at that point,
I'm not sure which ocean is on the coast of Korea, but I know there's an ocean there.
When you think about that, just the weight of that thought, and you see that Donald Trump has essentially seemed to have, anyway, eschewed all of the experts who were so crucial in negotiating previous deals with North Korea. What does it indicate to you about the way Trump has intended to carry out this? And what do you think of the overall event? Like, what's your reaction when you saw what happened to the result of it?
Well, the guys like Clapper and the army of diplomats and assistants and associates and all the rest of this bureaucracy that travels with these things, and the State Department and all of it, and Obama, these are all intellectuals who went to school in government. And when you look at their results fairly dispassionately, you find out what they do is whenever they approach a Gordian knot, the first thing they do is they add as much string to it as they possibly can. That's what the diplomats do. They just simply see how many more knots they could tie, and obviously Donald Trump is just cuts to the chase here. It is a seismic event, and it's a seismic event, I think, for a number of reasons. First of all, North Korea is known as the Hermit Kingdom. We call it the Hermit Kingdom outside of North Korea, and I suspect they call it that inside. Certainly in North Korea, they feel like it's North Korea versus the world. And if you can get a hermit down from his cave up in the mountains and have him stay in a luxury suite in Singapore, it's not that Kim doesn't know what luxury is. He knows very well what Western luxury is. But what you've done is you have included him in the community of nations by having him be seen with the leader of the community of nations. And that is an enormously powerful ego boost to this guy who's all about ego. Now, that may sound counterproductive, but it's not. As far as what comes out of the deal, what comes out of the treaty, it doesn't matter. Only Nixon could go to China, and once you've gone to China, now you have relations with China. Now you can start to have normalized relations with China, and that's what's going to happen in Korea. And it is going to be the end of the Korean War. And you could make a pretty compelling case that Donald Trump is going to be responsible for saving millions and millions and millions of lives from starvation and deprivation, the likes of which we can't imagine, if North Korea decides to join planet Earth in the 21st century. And I think they will. Because, as I stated earlier, Trump basically, by Trump saying, "Look, you want to threaten America? We'll come in there and we're going to turn your nation into a lake of fire, Rocket Man, little Rocket Man." He basically said to Kim, status quo and playing for time is not on your side anymore. Now it's working against you. You have the choice of either putting these nuclear weapons away or losing your country and your regime. And I'm not joking. And he didn't think he was joking. And then Trump offered him a third option, which is, okay, you can either be killed by your own people for not being tough enough on America, or you could be killed by our forces for being too tough on America. But there is a way where you could actually become a great figure in the history of your country, and you could become a great man, and you could achieve great things. And here it is on the table, and I'm offering it to you. And then Kim says, okay, fine, and screw you, America, by the way. And Trump says, no. If it's going to be, yes, I'll take it, and screw you, America, then you've obviously missed the point, so the whole deal's off. What now? I can sum all of this up in one very simple thing. Donald Trump, unlike Obama, and for that matter, Bush or Clinton, understands that the carrot is as important as the stick. But he understands something much more important than that even. Donald Trump understands that the stick has to come first. This is how you beat people. This is how you win wars. This is why Germany and Japan are so successful. Not because we offered them a carrot and then a stick. We gave them a hell of a stick. And once they'd been hit with the stick really, really hard, the appearance of the carrot was so unexpected and so transformational that Germany and Japan became Western nations and the closest allies of America because we use the carrot and the stick, but we use the stick first. And that's what Trump has done. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
As regular viewers of this program know, I've been reading Ron Chernow's biography of Ulysses Grant, and I just got done the section where the siege of Vicksburg happens during the Civil War. It was this southern city that was the siege went on for a long time, and ultimately Grant prevailed. And at the end of the siege of Vicksburg, there are thousands of Confederate soldiers who were starving to death. They're in there eating rats, just trying to survive, and they've been bombarded senseless. And Ulysses Grant makes a deal with the Confederate general that basically says unconditional surrender is your option. And the Confederate general, feeling cocky, said, well, here's the conditions that I want. I want this, I want this, I want this. And Grant wrote him a polite letter back that said, unconditional surrender is your option.
Or I will immediately move upon your works.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, good line.
But once Grant secured unconditional surrender, then as the Confederate soldiers came out of Vicksburg and piled up their military weapons along in a heap, the Union soldiers around them stood absolutely silent, made no comments, gave them full honors as soldiers, and they were allowed to keep their sidearms and to return to their farms. They were sent home from there. When Grant went to meet the Confederate general to do the actual surrender ceremony, the Confederate general took off his pistol and his sword and handed it to Grant, and Grant put his hand on the sword and returned it. Basically said, that won't be necessary. He gave it back to them. I saw a little bit of Ulysses Grant in Donald Trump this week. I saw, a guy who basically laid siege rhetorically to North Korea and to the North Korean dictator in any case, by the insults, by the threats, by the saber rattling that Donald Trump has conducted for the last year and a half or so. But then when he got face to face with him, he shook his hand. He reached out and touched him on the arm. As they were walking, he put a gentle hand on his back. He smiled at him. When Kim said something encouraging, Donald Trump actually gave him a thumbs up signal and reached across for a handshake. And some people looked at this and said, well, how can he treat this horrible dictator this way? This guy who currently has prisoners in gulags in North Korea, who has killed his own uncle and many other people in order to maintain his power. I think Donald Trump has a very practical view of the world. I think he looks at the Kim regime and says, that's what is. I think the previous administrations of American presidents said that's a horrible thing and that shouldn't be. And I think Donald Trump agrees with them. It shouldn't be. But that's what is. And you can't negotiate with something that you wish were real. You have to deal from the position of reality. And I think Donald Trump has a really firm sense of that. And so he goes in there, it's like, hey, the guy is the dictator of this country and he's got nuclear weapons. That's reality. We deal from that position. What's going to appeal to him? How about being a bigger man than his father or his grandfather ever were? How about showing him Singapore and what can happen when the capitalist engine is unleashed and people have liberty and people have luxury? They actually have to I think the road into the resort where they had this meeting goes past Universal Studios theme park on this island. So I've heard, and Rush Limbaugh was reporting that they actually showed Kim a video that somebody made of what North Korean shorefront property would look like with resort hotels on it. What Donald Trump has done is and we don't know yet whether this is going to succeed or whether Kim will go back on his word or anything, but what he has done is taken a completely different approach from previous presidents, and basically, instead of, Bill's right, there were threats, but instead of doing just that, after the threats, after the stick, he said, this isn't a carrot, Kim, this is carrot cake. This is cream cheese icing on top of carrot cake.
Well said.
I invite you to be part of this. I invite you to become a man who not only will be forced, his people will be compelled to refer to him as a god, but who literally to his people will seem like a savior. And I think Donald Trump has been brilliant in his conduct in this campaign. I hope he keeps it up, and I hope that it is effective. We shall see going forward. And that's what I felt myself doing all the time as I was watching this coverage. I just thought, man, he is not missing a beat here. We'll see. We'll see. And I predict, if I had to predict, that this will be a lot more fruitful than the last 60 to 70 years of failed U.S. and Chinese and South Korean and world community policy toward addressing this dictator. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.